Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Culture of Paint. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at what's caught our eye over the last few weeks in the miniatures painting world. Main topic for tonight's show is going to be intimidation factor when you start a project, what's going to put you off, what might stop you getting started, and then we'll close the show out as normal, looking at some of the work that our cultists have done using the hashtag PaintCultist. Now, Culture of Paint is aimed at a mature audience, and whilst it's unlikely, we may cover adult topics and use adult language. So let's talk about paint. Okay, I think we are on. So good evening, everyone in the chat. And we've got James, Max, Dan, Bert, Macklin, FBI, excellent. Rob's in there, lovely. Dr. Crushy, excellent. This is great. Thanks for joining us, guys. And hello to you three lovely boys as well. Let's crack straight on with the show. I think we don't need any more waffle. So the beginning of each show, guys, we're going to take a look at what's caught our eyes in the sort of miniatures painting world over the last couple of weeks. This is sort of the last couple of weeks and a bit. We're planning on recording before the big Games Workshop reveal that we had at the weekend. So there might be a few little additional things that we might want to have a chat about. But let's crack on. Andy, I think you're going to go first, bud. So take us away. What have you seen that's turned you on?
Wow. I've seen this, which is Michael Pazarski, which I'm sure is someone everyone's heard of. And I really liked this one. I thought this was actually a special one for him. And it kind of shows his two main things he's famous for, which is non-metallic metal and skin. And you can kind of always tell it's a land paint job from those things. But I thought it was a particularly good example of that, especially the gold. I thought the gold was really out there, and it looks like there's two different types of gold, with the hilt on the sword slightly more subtle, and then the really in your face gold of the shoulder, and then the silver. He's always doing the silver great, but yeah, I just thought it was the things he's done before, but for me even better, so really on point. And I've seen quite a few versions of this bust, and this was the first time where I was like, okay, I see what this bust is all about. And actually, weirdly, this week I've seen a couple more amazing versions of this. So yeah, I think
it's just popped up, hasn't it? In the last couple of days, there's been a few more.
Yeah, just really stood out to me as a particularly good work of his. So I really enjoyed the gold. I really enjoyed looking at that, and some good inspiration there. So
yeah, that shoulder pad's pretty
so rich,
good, isn't it?
that face.
Yeah,
I think the thing is, I've seen the faces on a few of the others and been like, oh, that's really good and everything, but that shoulder pad's really, it jumps out, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like he's improving, I think, on the stuff he was already great at, which is really cool to see. I love seeing that. And then I think we got another one that I liked. So this really caught my eye. David Aroba is an awesome painter. Check him out if you haven't seen his works already. He's doing some phenomenal stuff all the time at the moment. This is his first from his own range. I've bought this model. I really like it. I'm super excited for it to arrive in the post, and I think it's the next bust I paint. It's I'm really excited to do this one. But it was really great for me to see this, because I've been doing a lot of studying of skin and thinking about painting our skin with lots of greys and violets, and not really that traditional color. And so to see this from David Aroba, for me, was really cool and inspirational. And I like how there's a lot of flesh, but it's not like cheesy, like sexy. I think it's the right look. She's not like overly pretty or anything like that, because this potentially could be a miniature I really dislike because of the amount of skin on show, but I just think it's super cool.
I think it's always quite difficult to toe that line between showing a right amount of flesh, but also sometimes I think some models can get a little bit over the top or too like sexy in a way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Like no sort of not classy anymore, you know.
Yeah.
But this one's cool, and it's based on the art of Brom, who's somebody who's really influential in the miniature world. A lot of people like Brom stuff. So
what's that book you've got?
Really cool. The art of Brom.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So it's directly from one of his works, but David's just interpreted it super nicely. So yeah, really like that one.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I guess it's nice as well. You often bang on about Brom and David, so it's kind of nice to get a combo of those two. Thanks, mate. Rich, I think you're up next, bud. So, how have you been? What have you seen? What's tickled your pickle?
My pickle. I'm good. Evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. A few things actually. One of the things that's been nice to come out of a horrible situation that is lockdown. I think quite a few people are getting a bit of extra brush time. So my feed has been pretty chock with some great work, which is nice to see. Something that really caught my eye was the Space Wolf squad that you can see here by Panzertac. Doesn't have a massive following, but I love the work that he does. He's just finished this in a brilliant Tau kill team to go opposite each other, doing all the scenery for it as a project.
This is Instagram, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, on his Instagram, Panzertac. That's his handle on there, Panzertac. So give him a shout if you want to go see some awesome 40k miniatures. I just really liked it. I like the coherency. Space Wolves is a funny thing for me. Like, I've probably painted 4 or 5 in 4 or 5 different color schemes. I never found one that I actually really liked because I either went too grey and dull, too cartoony and blue. But I think he's just nailed it. I love the tone over, like how cold it is with the bases, the use of the color on the pads. The overall quality, I think, is great. And just like little conversions here and there, like the underslung grenade launcher on one of them has been remade. So it's not just a dinky thing sticking out the front of the gun.
Cool. I love the spear he's got on the main dude. What's he using?
I don't know what it is, but just little conversions like that. Like if you're doing something like a kill team, I think it's perfect. It's just small like bits that can really give your models a bit of life. So that's one of the things that's I've really enjoyed, amongst others. One of the things, obviously, after the preview on Saturday is everything is coming up vampires, which is a massive thumbs up from me. As me and Andy have been playing a fair bit of Underworld of AOS and been playing with my Undead. So yeah, it's been really good.
No, that's right, man. It's funny you say about the greys on the Space Wars. There's two Space Marine legions or chapters, whatever you want to call them, that have resulted in my paints getting a bit out of hand, and that's Space Wars and Alpha Legion. So consequently, I remember basically buying every grey from all the producers, and then every sort of turquoise color from every producer, and then and you can never quite get it how you want it. There's a few armies, isn't there, like that, where I think like Blood Angels, for instance, there's sort of an agreed red,
just a bang
red, right?
Or clear red. That is the agreed red, right?
Yeah. But like, I think you're right. Wolves, like Ultras, is often the same, isn't it? But like Wolves, it's often a different shade. Certainly in Heresy, I don't think I've ever seen a Sons of Horus army that's the same green, but sort of sea green color. It's funny, isn't it? And I mean, they don't really bother with the artwork either, do they? To be fair, they just do it what they think will look cool. It's always.
I think Space Wars are difficult, man. I think sometimes they can just lean a bit too cartoony. I mean, they're 9-foot space barbarian Vikings, So they should be like dark and savage and pretty cool when you look at other representations of Vikings within artwork or TV shows and stuff like that. But I do think sometimes they can lean towards the cartoony a little bit, and that's why I love Panzertac stuff, because it's not. No,
it's nice, man. There's a guy, Val Bjorn, VALBJORN on Instagram, does some fantastic green stuff work on Space Wars. I've been looking at him recently. I've been trying it out on some some old Mechanica models to maybe do something with. But
I feel like I should. I feel like I should collect Space Wolves just because I look like I could be one.
Beard needs to go more.
Retired and sort of got,
let himself go.
Let himself go of it.
I'm a retired Space Wolf.
It's the old magic one, wasn't it? What was the old priest?
Nigel.
No, not Nigel. They're just the generic priest.
Oh, I see. It's because you're too tall to be a dwarf, mate. So you've got to be
unfortunately.
Probably a Space Wolf.
I think what's really cool about his style is that it's not really to any extreme, because like he's rendered it, but he's not done it shiny. It's damaged, but it's not overly damaged. It's clean, but it's also gritty, and I think he's got like a wonderful balance, because they're really easy to look at, but they're not like bright blue edge highlight brand new. It's a real nice balance. It's like kind of, it's like grim dark but not lazy, you know. It's
I think that's very good way of describing it. That's exactly how I'd want. To me that's army painting, and I mean that as a compliment, not detrimentally. Like that, I think is a fantastic standard for army painting that he's got there. Like that looks cool, super close up on the screen, but I bet you it also looks great, 3 foot away on a board or whatever.
About the feel's right, isn't it? And I think that's like what you were saying about you. There's not one tone, because it's the feel you want, and if you want it to be a bit more grim dark and evil feeling, you have to go those desaturated colors. You've got to have a duller yellow, and you've got to have a duller gray, not the powder blue. And it's the same colors, but you're just changing it to get the right feel and evoke the right thing. And I think that's what he's done so right. It's really cool.
It's really cool. Is that Ragnar's body? Is it on the main dude?
No, it's the
Hathor battle leader.
Oh right, okay. It's a really nice conversion, man. I really like it. I'm trying to figure out what he's done that spear with. But anyway, I'll go and look at that later. Nice. And was there anything else, Rich? Or
no, that was sort of. I mean, other than the release at the weekend, seeing lots of nice new shiny stuff coming for our armies, which is good.
That's awesome. Cool, man. Well, I suppose my pick was sorted from the weekend, but it was earlier in the week when we saw a few of those fuzzy elf picks that the Warhammer community team then jumped on, putting some decent pictures out of. I never thought I'd pick an elf as my first thing that's caught my eye, or maybe happy over the last few weeks or anything. And elves is Andy's thing.
Been influenced,
particularly Lumineth. I'm really looking forward to.
Go Cows.
I hope you do that, army, mate. I really do. But
it's here.
I just think this that particularly Games Workshop, I think in Age of Sigmar have sort of pinned their colours to the wall. Age of Sigmar it's not the old world. It's long enough now that they don't need the old world to still draw people in, and it's developing its own look and its own aesthetic. And if I wanted to introduce someone to Age of Sigmar, what do I show them to instantly make them go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it? And it would be things like the Caradron Overlord ships, the Ideneth turtle. So things like that, just really messed up fantasy stuff. And then this guy or girl, I don't think there's anything I'd change on this model. I don't want it, and I'm not going to paint it. And I've no intentions of buying any Lumineth, and I don't necessarily like the whole Lumineth range. But this model, I just think's pretty flawless objectively for me. So subjectively, objectively, whatever we call it. There's just nothing I think that they should have done differently. I love it. I just think it's awesome. It's mainly the mount, I think, is what I really like.
Yeah.
The elf on top, whatever. The elf on top does look a little bit like the old 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy elf hero, which is a great model anyway. And I know they often do little nods back, but it's just the mount. It's just so cool to think we're going to start seeing beasties, weird beasties. And again, the paint job. Whether you like it or not, the heavy metal guys are phenomenal at what they do, and I think it's just It's just great. It's just great, even though it's an elf.
Yeah, I think it's really important that Age of Sigmar gets its own identity, and it's been both annoying but also cool for me to see like the kind of the hate and the divided opinions. But I like that because it's different, and that's what I want to see. Like, I love a standard classic high elf, normal elf on a normal horse, but
Yeah.
it's been done. And although we'd be like, oh, that's like a perfect version of the old stuff we like, it's more enjoyable for me to be surprised. And this model I want so much. It's just great. And I think it's cool that they're trying stuff different. I know the kangaroos divided so many people, but I've got a unit of horses. Like, let's go kangaroos. It's new. That's cool. So, myself and Rich talked a lot about we like how they're going really high fantasy as opposed to kind of run of the mill, and that's cool.
Medieval Europe or Tolkien light, isn't it? That was always the oldest step, which I adore. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, same.
You want something new from it, and for someone myself, I've got fairly narrow exposure or level of interest in fantasy and sci-fi. It's largely down to the Games Workshop universes is what I enjoy. A few other things, Lord of the Rings, Dune, things like that, but it's mainly those guys. So to be exposed to a different setting, but via them it's cool. It's and I think I've a few of my friends who really enjoy more of the manga films and things that definitely mentioned, this is some really cool stylings and things in here. It echoes this and it echoes that, and I think it can only be a good thing, right, to start bringing in people that are maybe who weren't interested in that medieval European style of fantasy. So yeah, big fan, big fan. And lastly, Matt, it's you. What have you seen in the last couple of weeks then?
Been all these sort of loads of them have popped up recently on Instagram. Like, I think a lot of people have finished painting them now, and there's just so many people that I just finished them, and I just saw this one a couple of days ago, and it's just so cool. It's not a squig hopper.
Yeah.
And you got all the little moon crayon grot sort of stuff on it, and just so expressive in the face, and the skin tones that the Sergio's got out of it is just awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And this is Lucas Pina sculpt. Yeah. This is pretty insane, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm gutted I didn't know about it before they weren't available anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So Lucas does a pre-order effectively, right? He says, "Here's my new sculpt. Order before this date. That's how many I'm casting."
Yeah,
done, right?
So I missed out on this one, but hopefully the next one.
I just get every one he does in case you want it later.
Yeah.
Even if I'm like, I don't want that, you've got 48 hours to get it, so I just get it. Like, you just get it.
Yeah. But
it's the faces he does, man. Like, I know it's a goblin, but it's still his faces, isn't it? You can still see his old witches in there. You can see the gnomes, all those sorts of things.
It's the wrinkles, right? And the just the shape of the hand, like the bend of the wrist, and he's just amazing, and a real example of why traditional sculpting has a long has longevity.
I love the way he's managed to get the hands, like it's actually grabbing onto the folds in the squig, like he's actually holding onto that thing for dear life.
The bullsaurus.
Yeah, not squig. The not squig bullsaurus.
I suppose
it's just so fun as well.
Yeah,
like, it's just such a fun. We said about it a little bit last episode about how sometimes there's space just for how fun things are, and yeah, I think it's amazing. It's great.
Yeah,
perfect.
I think that's
your one. So it was a nice one to check out. I think this Andy's recently done a tutorial on this model for our patron, for Cult Paint Patron, and he mentioned before doing that exactly what you've just said then, Andy, that you've collected loads of these Lucas Pina sculpts. Why haven't you painted any of them yet? And that sort of led on to the idea for the main topic for today's show, which I think has ended up actually spawning probably a few shows worth of things to dig into. But it was largely to do with this idea of the intimidation factor, the fear factor that can sort of kill a project before it started. Whether it's a new army and you're overwhelmed because you bought it all and built it and you know what to do, whether it's a competition piece and you're doubting your skills or things like that. A character model, am I up to it? Limited edition models, I don't want to ruin it. Should I keep it in the box? And all these things that you read about. So I think it's something we wanted to have a chat about. And it's also something we threw out to the Co-op Paint patrons just to get their take on what things intimidate them or what things can stop them doing a project. We've got a heap of questions to get through, so we'll do our best to get through them in this main section. I have saved a few of them for a different show because I think there's a slightly different take as opposed to intimidation or fear. I think there's sometimes analysis paralysis. I think I quite like that phrase, so I think that maybe is another thing we can talk about. But if you boys are all right, I think we'll just crack straight into the questions.
Yep, sounds good.
So Rich, I think you were going to take this one. This is from Matthew. I get intimidated by models with many separate bits and small details, something like Mortarion for 40k or the Triumph of St. Catherine, which is that Sisters of Battle procession thing. I feel like I'm going to miss something. How do you prep or plan for this?
So for me, when doing a model like that, I initially think about what it is I want to achieve with the model is a big part of it. So if I want to paint something to the highest level that I can and really push myself, will potentially change how I paint it to if I, for instance, just wanted to paint something and I wanted to create quite a good theme or have it tell a story. In that, if I was aiming for a competition piece, then general rule of thumb for me is I would want every element of it to be painted to the same quality, which for me personally does involve sub-assemblies. So it would involve, for me, building the model essentially as it would look and then almost taking it apart so that you can then sub-assembly paint those individual bits. But it's an interesting one because it's something that I have, my opinion on it has changed over time. So when I initially started painting competition pieces, etc., I would almost paint an entire mini individually in like bits and then put it together afterwards, so that I made sure that I could get to all those different areas. Whereas now, after speaking to different painters that I like really admire, I feel like Mark Maskelyne, for instance, fully builds pretty much everything that he paints all in one go because that helps him dictate where the light is. So I think it's something that you can do multiple different ways. Personally, for me, if it's something that I was going to paint to that was very complicated, that I was going to paint to a very high level, I would still sub-assembly it, but I would build it together first. Take multiple photos of it, for instance, so that you know exactly where things sit, different angles, you know where light's going to be. Or if you were going to be using an airbrush, for instance, you would build it, maybe do some of the airbrush working, and then take it to pieces again. So you've got those base colors and you know where your lights are going to hit.
So what do you use with that? Blue tack? Super glue?
Yeah, blue tack normally. Yeah, you either tack it together, or if you put a tiny little bit of blue tack in, you can take it up a little bit of super glue. You can pull it apart again afterwards. It depends on the model as well. So someone like Mortarion, I would do sort of wings separately, base separately, but I'd probably keep all of his armor in one piece because that for me is that's the showstopper. That's what I want everyone to look at. So that bit I would paint together. Various reasons why, like, I have had some horror stories where I've painted something that I thought was the best thing I've ever painted. It's in 4 or 5 different pieces. And then when I went to put them together, I either covered it in glue, stuck my fingers to it, it was a bit of freehand or whatever, and I just ruined it. I've ruined models that I loved by trying to put it together afterwards. But then alternatively, I've painted something built it to paint it all in one go and been like, and then I've realized there's no physical way that I can get to a certain area of it to get it to the level that I wanted it to. So it is unfortunately very much swings and roundabouts. It does take a lot of practice. But I would still, if I was, say, for instance, going to be painting something for a competition tomorrow, I would still sub-assemble it. But I would probably go for slightly bigger sub-assemblies than I used to. I wouldn't take it to pieces. What do you guys think about it?
So with that, I mean, you obviously, those you guys that don't know, Rich is the head of our commissions studio. Does the majority of the stuff that comes out of the studio. I've been doing some for us recently as well. With, as opposed to sort of sub-assemblies and things on a large model, something like Triumph of St. Catherine, that's not necessarily a large model, right? It's just lots of models on a base. How do you approach not forgetting bits? So rather than making sure you can get to all the bits and all the rest of it, how do you actually not get 80% of the way through the model and then go, oh my goodness, I haven't done this yet, or like, I know, Andy, you're keen when it comes to painting faces of often doing the eyes first, right, and then the rest of the face after. Let's say you get through a project, you've done loads of work on the face, and you go, oh no, I've got to paint the eyeballs in. What's your method for that? Is it a case of literally planning it down, writing it out, checking things off? Is it? I mean, for me, I try to use fewer paints, so I will try to use a color on lots of different areas, and that will sort of keep me clued in with what's going on. So I'm checking the whole model all the way around with a color rather than checking for individual pieces. What's your approach for that? Rich? Sorry.
Me.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, man. I was just mentioning your eye thing.
No, that's fine. So I do various things. I have done it before, where I go around with a color and make sure that I've checked off everything. One really big thing for me is my sort of painting peers. So like, if you're staring at a model for 2 or 3 weeks over and over and over again, inevitably just by the fact that that's one of the only things you're looking at, you might not need to see something that some more fresh eyes will particularly see. So if I'm entering something, I'll send it to Andy or my friend Ben, and I'll just get them to have a look at it and ask them what they think. I think being able to be honest with somebody about their painting and be constructive, I think, is a really good tool to help people progress or notice things that I wouldn't necessarily see. So like, I know Andy, for instance, when it comes to faces, I would send it to him and like, what do you think? Is there anything I've missed? Just because they might spot something that you haven't really.
It's normally the pupils, isn't it, mate?
It's normally the what? Sorry,
the pupils.
Yeah,
pupils.
My favorite thing to paint in the world.
Nipples, There's been some nice pupils on that. The land sculpt you brought, not sculpt, the land paint job you did earlier. Is it Kirill? No, Carol. Carol did that.
The one we looked at for my pick.
The one that land painted.
It's Galapagos Miniatures. Oh, right, okay, but yeah,
there's been a lot of pupil work
on
that. Yeah, I've been seeing people do. Nice one, thanks, bud. So Matt, I think you're going to take the next one. So this is from Philip. Putting off painting something because you think you'll ruin it. Certainly something I've done. I'm telling yourself you're going to practice X skill on something else, and then you never really do. Are there any big time, right? Are there any ways to change one's thinking around this, not ruining a project but still doing it? I hope that makes sense. So yeah, what do you reckon?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's we've all done it. I have a cabinet full of shame to attest to it. I mean, it's hard to change your mind on something. I think the worst thing for me was when I found Biostrip 20 and sort of this thing. I paint it. No, don't like it. I know I can take the paint off. But there's only so many times you can do that before you're taking more paint off than you're putting on. It's a very difficult one. I mean, the perfect paint job doesn't exist. I think we can all sort of kind of agree with that. Practicing skills before you attempt something, it can have its advantages. You know roughly where you're going to be when you get down to your big project. But I think for me now, I just go, I'm just going to do it. And if it's not an award-winning paint job, it doesn't really matter, because it's still, I've completed it. It's something that's done then. I've not just got a half painted model that I'm never going to touch again because I think, oh, I've got to this point, but I don't know how to do this bit, so I'm not going to try it. Yeah, I think just doing the paint job rather than just sort of thinking about it is the only way to really get over it. Just attempt it. Like if you fail, like you haven't really failed. You've just know you need to do something different next time.
That's it, isn't it? And it's that idea of so I mean this is using an analogy from something, but it's the idea of you'll never get 100 no's in a row when you're looking for a job or something like that. You know, you need to go out and collect those things before you can get the yes. So it's almost like you need to go out and mess those models up, or not necessarily mess them up. You need to go out and do them and them not be as good as you want, so that you can then figure out how good you are. Yeah. Where are your shortcomings? Where do you need to improve? Or you might surprise yourself and go, oh, actually, no, that's really good. Turns out I can paint eyeballs really well, or whatever, and then carry on.
Yeah, because the thing, like, if you don't finish a project, you don't know where you sort of stand up to where you want to be. If you sort of half do, like, if you're doing some non-metallics and you go halfway through it, but you never really complete it, you never sort of understand where the issues are because you're only halfway through it.
Yeah, so, I mean, Rich is pretty guilty of this for test models, right?
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people, and personally, I think a lot of people, they'll give up on a paint job 80% of the way through, and actually, it's not until that final session maybe that everything does come together. Like it can look like utter garbage. I know certainly when we do the classes, one of the things people have said that they find really valuable is seeing that process, is understanding how it's not perfect from the very first brushstroke.
Yeah.
You know, there's constant refining, but then as you say, there gets to a point where what's the saying, the finished is better than perfect, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
finished, not perfect.
Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is something we brought up on the pilot show. Actually, we chatted about very, very, very briefly. Anyway, it was this idea of sort of comparing yourself, getting intimidated by seeing other people's work, and therefore not going out and doing your own. So succinctly, the advice is just paint it, right?
Not just paint it, sort of finish it to the point where you're happy with it at that point, but don't go, oh, this doesn't look exactly how I imagined it in my head, and therefore it's crap. It's not that sort of case. Like I was painting a bust and I was painting the skin, and I was just like, I hadn't even got to my highest color yet, and I was like, no, this doesn't look like the picture of. And I'm just like, and then a couple of weeks later, I was like, well, it's not going to look like the picture because it's not finished.
Yeah.
And sort of me comparing a half-finished paint job to a finished paint job is not a good idea.
So where do you guys? Sorry, Rich. I
was just going to quickly add to that. Like, also, if you are finishing things and it's not perfect, which I do love that hashtag finish not perfect. You know, you've got a catalog that you can actually physically see your progress through miniature on miniature. So I always keep around a few miniatures that I've painted from a few years back just to see the way that I've progressed in those few years. If you stripped everything or got rid of everything, you would probably feel like you were exactly in the same place that you were a couple of years ago because you've never seen the fruits of the labor. So keeping models that maybe it's not your best model, maybe you don't love it, maybe you don't even like it that much anymore, but I would always keep it around or even photos of it around as a reminder of something that you tried. So then when you tried it again, you can sort of compare it against it and see where you are.
You're also you're stopping yourself getting the opportunity for feedback, and if there's like a particular area that's you're worried about, like skin, there's so many ways to get feedback. Like you can pay for it, you can just post it in a forum or a Facebook group and ask for it directly, and until you've painted it, you can't get any feedback. And there might actually be just one maybe really simple thing to resolve it, like your paint's too diluted is one that keeps coming up for me with people recently. So I think you can't deny yourself that feedback. So if you're not trying, you're never going to be able to get help. And actually, if you paint it once and somebody helps you with the things that you need to work on, that could be what you need to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, for sure. That's a nice one. That I think you're taking the next question as well, Matt. So sorry, throwing you straight back in. This one's from Ali. The model that's intimidating me the most is Sanguinius and his display base. The thought of trying to nail all the NMM and not messing it up, and also picking the right colours for the demon to contrast Sanguinius, but also not to look out of place, can be very intimidating. So this is, I guess, that analysis paralysis thing I mentioned earlier. Yeah,
I mean, it's a massive model. It's it's not a model that you would perhaps want to try to learn NMM on. It's there's a lot of surfaces on that. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of filigree, and just it's a big model. I mean, I have it sat in my cabinet, and it's still just built because I haven't got the courage to face it at the moment. I started building it at the start of lockdown, and I haven't touched it since. I mean, non-metallics is one of the banes for me. I struggle quite a lot to imagine the light sources, where they're coming from, where to go up to in the highlights. It's a difficult one. I mean, I went on when we was on the non-metallic course in last March. That kind of opened my eyes a bit to, but you put big light sources on and then refine them down, which is quite a nice way to look at it, because I always was going big shadows to smaller light sources and then going, well, it's too small now, but I can't make it any bigger. Sort of picking like a nice contrast to the Sanguinius model. It kind of depends on the color of gold, I'd say. Like if you've got quite a nice rich gold, you may want a less rich demon to kind of contrast those two models against each other. But if you've got a very dull gold, you might want a very rich demon. But I'd probably finish painting one first and then maybe look at the other one and try to contrast that later.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So rather than planning the entire thing out to begin with, just get the gold how you want it, and then worry, because I mean that's not going to happen overnight, is it?
No, that's going to be a long process.
And then worry about that later. And also, I mean, let's be fair. Like, it's a diorama. It's that's a serious piece to paint, right? I think that the Primark models from Forge World have generally got more and more elaborate as it has gone on, right? Although the lion was quite nice. Of course, quite a little bit simpler. But I think Sanguinius is certainly probably him and Magnus, maybe the two busiest Primark models, just with things going on. Have you done a Sanguinius, Andy, or not?
I've got one the other day, so came in the post.
There we are.
But I need a break from gold.
Fair.
And there is a huge amount of detail on that model. It's a very, very busy model.
Yeah.
It's a scary one. I can definitely see why people are intimidated, because it's for many people it's an important model as well. We just always grew up wanting a Sanguinius to exist, and then it does. So then it's kind of like, I want this to be good. But the thing is, I know it's not a cheap model. It's like 80 quid, but you can do another one day. So just, start it, paint it, and maybe in 2 years' time, if it's like your favorite model, like you love Blood Angels, just do another one. I don't see anything wrong with that. Like, I probably wouldn't do another model I've done again, but something like Magnus I would actually do again, even though I did it 2 years ago. I would do Magnus again because he's my favorite Primark model. So
I think it goes back to, again, not striving to have the most absolute perfect model first time around, because it's not going to happen like the way you
You
want
have
it
to
to happen.
accept, don't you?
Yeah, you just kind of have to like let the model be how it's going to be. Like it's always going to have some bits that you don't like and some bits that you do like. I think if you ask any award-winning painter what bit of the model don't you like, they'll find a bit that they don't like.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely acceptance, because if you don't, then you're kind of destined for unhappiness, really.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have to deal with everything in life. You've got to accept some stuff, and I've got really bummed out about some paint jobs, like really bummed out and not wanting to paint and stuff. But then later accepted it and finished it and enjoyed it. And I think that it's important to try and get better and work on things like your weaknesses, but yeah, always accept that it can't be a certain way, or you're where you're at, and stuff.
It's an interesting one as well, because you think Ali sort of got a few points to that question as well. He's not only worrying about the immediate technical skill of executing gold NMM well, he's then also looking more into the theory side of things, of how can this demon complement Sanguinius, so before he's even thinking about painting it, he's there's an additional layer of things to consider. And I would say one thing we wanted to do with Cult of Paint was be this thing that we always wanted when we started painting, which was this resource, or these people, or this community that we could reach out to for help, for support, for guidance, and that type of thing. And I do think maybe trying to go into Sanguinius on your own, might not necessarily be that good an idea. That there are people out there. There's your peers. There's people like ourselves. There is, if you're brave enough, randoms on the internet that you can approach and talk to about this kind of thing. I mean, even Andy, I think it's fair to consider you one of the top competitive painters currently around.
Thanks, mate.
Even though we'll ignore last year. Prior to last year, when things were happening, you were, and you, I know, still talk to your peers a lot, and even people that are, in my opinion, nowhere near your level of painting will still have valid opinions, right? That you will find helpful when planning a piece, right? You're not trying to do it on your own.
No, definitely not. It's soundboarding is everything, really. And I think going back to like choosing the contrasting colors to Sanguinius with the demon, that's like a whole thing you can talk about. But I think the best thing to do is discuss with people options, and don't take anyone's word like for gospel.
Yeah, and especially if they tell you more contrast is good, right?
More is more.
More is more, right?
But like, there's so many ways you could do that, and you don't want to have like any concrete theory. But if you can just get someone to discuss options, and then you pick the one you like the best. Like Matt was sort of talking about temperature contrast, because he was saying, well, if you have a warm gold, then why not have a cool red for the demon? And that would be a double contrast, because you got red versus yellow, warm versus cool. But the other thing is, you could say, well, what environment has a warm light? That means that warm light on both of them would make it coherent. And both of those things work. Like you could have a yellow demon and it could contrast or work with it. There's not a set way, and there's not a set theory like you have to be complementary contrast. It must be like this. But just talk to people, and every opinion you get is an option, and then you weigh up what you think you like the best. And for me, I always look at the art books and stuff to see colors I like, and I go, oh, I like that red, that's pleasant to my eyes, let's see how I can recreate that. But you're only painting minis for you, so you have to find a look that you like, and you're going to be happy with that Sanguinius. So listen to other people's opinions, but just think of them as one possible road to go down. And that's the same with all color theory. Color theory is not concrete, and people get too bogged down and lost in it when it's just an idea, isn't it? Really?
No, you're right.
It's
That's
just
a
a theory.
whole other couple of shows in that, I think, including some salty ones. So let's crack on. So this is a bunch of questions for you, Andy. I've lumped together for you, and this is largely because they're covering very similar topics. So Mike's asked, models with larger areas put me off. Things that I don't want to tackle with the airbrush, but always do. Things like fabric or skin. The model I'm most looking forward to, but also dreading from the Kickstarter, so that's from our Daergar Kickstarter, late pledges, link in the description, is the Hunter and all that skin. He says he'd love to paint it with a brush, but he knows he'll lose his rag and go to the airbrush. Neil's gone larger minis with skin tones. So again, this is what I'm on about, this theme sort of carrying on. Scares him to death as there's so many amazing minis out there, and mine just look flat and a bit shit. Probably not. It's probably not that bad, Neil. And also models with a lot of NMM. We will do tons of shows on NMM, guys, in the future. I'm sure we will cover it, and it's a topic that we cover a fair amount on Patreon.
Too much, some people would say.
Yeah. And then lastly, Scott's gone, going from painting Warhammer scaled miniatures to busts. I've got my first bust to try. It's all ready to go. I'm just a bit nervous about the increased scale of it, getting the skin right. So I guess the common thread through those is the intimidation factor of all of a sudden the painting the skin isn't just the little head on your Space Marine Sergeant. It's now a significant part of this model you're painting, and at a larger scale where things like your light are a lot more important. So yeah.
Yeah, loads of stuff. I definitely like. I really remember these exact feelings, and I also remember getting a bit better and thinking, okay, skin's my biggest weakness. I'm going to concentrate on that. And then I remember the shift to enjoying it, and so it is kind of possible. And it goes back to the earlier question of just having a go and stuff like that, and you can get there. But recently I did the Bullsaurus, which is the Lucas Pina model, and the real estate on the squig is pretty bonkers. And I went for orange, which obviously doesn't have good coverage. So that was like, okay, how's this going to be? And even though I felt that way anyway, I surprised myself how if I diluted the paint nicely and I took my time, it didn't matter at any mistakes I made on it, because the paint was I would just go over it, and any kind of mistakes or colors just added to it and the layers. So I think you can almost, if you're methodical and careful, you can just go one bit at a time and get some feedback as you go. So, okay, what's the first thing we got to do? We've got a base coat. So how do we base coat? Well, it's going to be letting layers dry, getting it dilute. And if you maybe start with a nice base coat, you can pause, you can relax, and then maybe just think about the next step. Okay, what do I do next? Shall I do the first highlight, the first shadow? But I think if you just kind of relax and take each step as it comes, you'll be okay. But what I found with the Bullsaurus was, and it's such a big model, that it was more forgiving than you think, because you've got that space. And like on a Space Marine head, if you put one highlight in the wrong place, it looks awful. On the Bullsaurus, I could put a massive splodge of orange and it'd be fine, because it's a big thing, and a little dot of paint on a bust face could be a freckle later, or something like that. But I think, yeah, the main thing is anything you're worried about, just take it one step at a time. And if you're careful with your paint application, you can always change it. So if you put a highlight in the wrong place, provided you've applied that paint nicely, you can just shift it over and tweak it and adjust and stuff like that. So, and like we said, there's plenty of tutorials out there, but Yeah, I just think take your time, get the advice between the steps. That's the best way to go about anything where you're worried.
It does seem to be a common theme in a lot of these questions is the fear isn't necessarily about not knowing how to tackle the challenge, and maybe that's because there are so many sources of tuition out there now, whether that's in-person classes, YouTube, Patrons, or whatever like that. It feels more like what's stopping a lot of people is this fear of failure. And I think that's probably quite interesting. Probably something I shouldn't have just thrown out as a question right there. Prepped you for it a bit more, but it's only just sort of dawned on me as we've talked through it. But I do think it's that fear of the unknown, isn't it? Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, particularly with big models. Now, when it comes to these larger scale models, I have seen 1,000 Space Marines that are not painted to my taste, or could have been, in my opinion, painted better. And I've seen tons that I think are incredible. But the vast majority of times that I see a bust or a large scale miniature, they're often painted to, showcase a multiple award winning standards. Where are those people to pitch yourself against, to give yourself an idea of, that those people that's not their first bust. Right, it's probably not their first bust. It's probably not their first 54mm or 75mm model. So I think that fear of failure is definitely a thing in there, and I do wonder if it is exaggerated or exacerbated in the larger scale minis world. So let's have a look at resources. And so where would you recommend going then, Andy, to have a look at? Let's talk about skin, because that was in all three questions. Where would you recommend going and looking at how people are painting skin on these larger miniatures? Is it Instagram? Are there other resources? What should they be searching? What's because I would guess your feed in particular, or your collection of outlets in particular, you've got a lot of these larger scale miniatures in, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would just look at photos. We always talk about that, looking at the references, most of all. But actually, I find when you look at a photo, say a portrait of a woman, like I'm going to paint that bronze bust, and just looking at photos helps more, because you start to realize like colors in skin and maybe more simple than you think, and things like that. And you have to maybe paint less than you think. So I'd always just look at that and try not to look too much at maybe the perfect box art, because that's when you're going to get this, I want it to look like that thing, and maybe that's not realistic, and going back to acceptance, but just like having a look at stuff and having a go. But then again, there's certain artists where you can look at their paint jobs, and really, if you just zoom in, you can analyze where highlights should be and learn from that, like Kirill Kniv, Mark Masklans. You can actually learn so much from just studying their faces, I think. And just like, where are the highlights going? I think that's the big thing on faces, is where do they go? And if you look at those painters, and you go, oh, didn't know the highlights went there, like in that crease of the eye or something. And then you can solidify that by going back to the portraits, and then you can have a go and start to work out the colors. So I'm the sort of person that learns from looking like that, like not necessarily from reading or listening, but just like really looking. So yeah, that's all I got to say on that.
So no, that's interesting. Thanks. But what I was actually more getting at was, like, if I want to go and if I'm not sure how to paint a Ultramarine Space Marine, I know where to go.
Yeah,
right. I can go on Instagram, I can go on Pinterest, I can go whatever. Where are your resources coming from if you want to get into this larger scale miniatures painting? I mean, is it things like putty and paint? Is that going to be the more so?
I definitely think just finding the artist's feed. So that's why I said, just for busts, you look at Kirill Knieve, you look at Mark Masklans. And I think, just looking at those guys, really. Putty and Paint does have a larger volume of busts and large-scale stuff. So definitely, that's definitely a good recommendation, I'd say. And you can go on top artists on there, and it's sort of ranked. It's not a perfect system for ranking, but generally you've got loads of people that are good at painting and stuff like that. Looking at their whips is super interesting. Like if you get to see their steps. The Kirill Knieve book that's come out is bonkers good. Couldn't recommend that more. So there's definitely some resources out there, I think.
Yeah, that's good, man. Kane and Liam in the chat have just sort of been saying, I think it's something we touched on the pilot episode as well, is the amount that you see out in social media now can sometimes be off-putting. Like it can,
it's too much.
Stop. Yeah, it can sort of stop you in your tracks, especially if you're a newcomer and you see one of Kirill's busts or one of your 50 formats, and that's sort of why I wanted to just dig a bit more as to where are some good places to go and see the rest of the larger scale miniatures painters. These guys that aren't necessarily the cream of the crop. Just to get more of an idea.
I think with the social media stuff, it's almost not a fear of failure; it's a fear of comparison. You're comparing yourself to someone that has, decades on you. Like it's not a good fit. Like the social media has, it's brought the hobby to a lot of people now, but it can be not a great place to kind of get inspiration from on that sort of level. Like you're comparing yourself to someone that you really probably shouldn't be. Like it's nice to kind of get there and get the ideas and get the inspiration, but don't compare your skill level to theirs. It's
be inspired, don't compare. Be realistic based, isn't it? I asked someone that recently, actually. I've sort of was helping someone out who was really new to the hobby. I said, "How long have you done the hobby for?" And they said, "Oh, 6 months." And I was like, "Wow, what's that like?" Like there's so much. When I started, there was a couple models in the cabinet and White Dwarf, and that was everything. And then what's it like starting this hobby where you can just put in hashtag Warhammer, see endless crazy good stuff? It's just I can't imagine, to be honest, being a brand new hobbyist. Like, is this the level that everyone's at?
Intimidating. And the problem with that is also the better stuff gets the more likes, so that's what you're going to see more often.
Right.
Especially in feeds, you're always going to see the top cream of the crop rather than your average Joe.
Now the flip side is there is more help than ever, and it's so easy to reach out. So I think if you're open, and it was what I was saying earlier about you have to paint something to get feedback. I think if you're like open to kind of talking to some people and getting that help, it's just so easy now. You can go on a Facebook group for busts and go, "Hey, this is my first go at a bust. What do you think?" And there'll be some people the same level that'll help out and stuff. So it's there's some negatives and some positives. So I think you gotta try and take the positive parts and get the feedback and get the help and try and relax and just get people to help you out, really.
Yeah, spot on. And that last one's a very good point. Is we can only speak for ourselves, but I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that feel the same way. We want people to be better painters. And that's not just from a selfish point of view, so that we get to see cool models, or from people to go, "Oh, your teaching was fantastic," and all the rest of it. There is a desire to see other people improving their painting. So we need people like Mike, Neil, Scott to ask about these things, right? It's no one's going to be or anyone worth their salt is not going to be pissed off or angry at someone for asking for help, right? But particularly when you put yourselves out there as saying, well, that's what we want to do, is help guide people, and whether that's with guiding them to a tutorial or actually giving direct advice or whatever. So I think what you're saying there, Andy, about reaching out and asking for advice to do with this stuff is do it. You know, if you go, oh, I've watched 20 tutorials on this skin and I just don't get it, you know, then ask someone. You know, yeah, you might ask 5 people and 4 of them might fob you off or do whatever, but someone will want to help you improve painting. That's how everybody got better. You know, if you take it right back to how art has always happened, and this goes back to miniatures being art and all the rest of it that we chatted about last time, is you would have masters and you would have apprentices and you would have schools of styles and all the rest of it. And it's because there are always going to be passionate people who want to talk about what they've done or what they've learnt with others, right? And I think it's just finding them. It's just fishing them out and finding the people that you can jive with and that are on your wavelength, and you go with it. So yeah, some good questions there. Thanks, mate. A bit simpler, a bit quicker. I think this one, Rich.
Yeah.
Hello. 2 seconds.
Go for it.
Sorry, but where are we? Let's get them up. Right, this one's from Chris. This is, I'd love to get your thoughts or pointers on how to mass paint fantasy armies with large amounts of skin, like Chaos Marauders. Hopefully not those awful 20-year-old Games Workshop models, ogres, etc., and how you go about painting the arms. Faces, he said he finds okay, but he really struggles with painting muscles and whatnot.
So for me, this is kind of a multi-part question. When it comes to specifically painting muscles, kind of off the back of what Andy said, using photos, references, and then kind of what was said just before about if you found someone that you admire that paints muscles in a way that you would like to replicate, then please reach out to them. Odds are they will be very nice about it and they will point you in the right direction. But for me, the overriding thing with this is painting large armies, specifically. If in this question it's like fantasy armies, it's all about kind of what do you want the army to be. So for me, if I want an army that I'm going to paint to the highest level, it's probably not going to be a very big army because of just the amount of time that's going to take. I think if it's an army that you really want to play with, I think you can be a bit more lenient on yourself on how those muscles look by the end of it, because if you've got a block of 20 of those models all painted the same, that's what's going to look amazing. This picking the right tones is important, but I think more it's the overall finish when it comes to armies as to how they look, like how to make them look really good. But I do think it's something that I struggle with. Like I've got 2 armies for AOS on the go at the moment. One is a very small orc army that I've tried to paint as well as possible, which is driving me mad, and I've got one army which is the undead army, which I can knock out units for in a couple of days. So I think it's really important to sort of decide what it is you want to achieve with that army. Is it you want an army that's going to look fantastic on a tabletop? If that's the case, I think there are some pretty quick ways that you can paint skin, utilizing things like contrast paints, airbrushes, different tools like that. Or is this an army that you would like to pick each individual model up, look at it, and be able to really be impressed with that paint job on those muscles, in which case it's going to take more time and it would be more looking at reference photos and trying to replicate other work in the miniatures that you're painting yourself.
That's cool, man. Would you talk about your orcs then? So I mean, we've recently done a couple of videos on YouTube about simple sort of starting point recipes for doing skin. So we did a simple sort of white skin, Caucasian skin, and a simple black skin, and then sort of encourage people to go off and work from there. But there is always, I wonder if there is anyway, this, and there's something Rob has said in the chat, he struggles with skin color when it comes to painting skin, is color selection. It's not always easy to know which colors are the quote unquote right colors. So do you actually think maybe if it would be better or easier or whatever you want to call it, less intimidating, whatever, to do something like orc skin, which there's a tutorial for on YouTube as well, actually, which I think you use 3 colors for, Andy, and and it's They look fantastic. So do you think maybe it's easier to start on something like an orc where there is no preconceived notion of this is what skin should look like, because we don't know what an orc looks like?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're trying to practice with your skin tones, I think that could be a really good idea, because it's a lot more lenient, isn't it? Like if you've got human skin, it is a specific tone, and I'll put my hand up and say that I struggle with human skin a lot more than I do with other skin, like orc skin, that kind of thing. Because for me, if I'm painting an orc, I want it to be bright and bold, and that's what I want the impression of the miniature to be. So I'll throw some very, very shiny green paints at it. But yeah, I mean, it could be a good way to practice, I think, if that was something that you wanted to do. But I do think also the theory, regardless of the colours, is similar.
That's it. Right?
If you're more comfortable, if you're very comfortable in a paint range, so for instance, if there's a few paints that you love to use and you know how they work together, there's nothing wrong with painting skin in those colours, just to work out how the volumes work together, not worrying about the different tones, and then trying to transform that idea into flesh tones that people have used. But I struggle with flesh tones all the time. Like, what's a good one? What could look better in the minutes that I'm painting, or just preference. And in that case, I do always reach out. So there's people that I find who I really enjoy the skin that they've painted, and I will message them directly, and I'll just ask for a recipe, just because I think all it takes sometimes is someone to point in the right direction, especially something like that, because it can be a bit much. Like, you're worrying about, like, what are these colors all right? Do they work together? But then you're also worrying about the application. Maybe break it down, get your application sorted, so you know exactly where the colors are going to go, using, like I said, colors that you're more comfortable with, and then maybe worry about the colors that you would want to achieve the right tone.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said, isn't there, for that Citadel sort of triad system that they used, or is it Foundry paints? They're the ones that do the triad paints, or just that idea of just have a shadow, a middle, and a highlight.
Yeah.
Don't try and get too smart with it. Don't try and put 43 different colours into the shadows of the skin just so you can tell people you've put 43 colours into the shadows. It's just, like you say, start to begin to understand how it should look and behave. It's interesting. I think it's certainly I'm the flip side. I am looking forward to paint skin. I've all the times I've done it, I have always enjoyed doing it. I've not necessarily always been happy with the result, but it's if a model's got loads of skin on it, I will look forward to painting it. And I think certainly it's what's making me lean more towards wanting to do busts at the moment rather than 54 or 75 mil, or at least I want those 54 or 75 mils to be predominantly skin. And I bet you by the time you've painted one or two of those, you'll be a hell of a lot more confident in painting skin. But to go back to the initial question about the army painting idea of it, it's keeping it simple, right?
I think it's all about going, what do you want the army to be? Do you want it to be a display army? If you do, then you can put a lot of time into the theory of painting skin the right color tones.
Yeah.
If you want,
I'd push back on that. I'd argue, look, if you painted a unit of 30 Chaos Marauders, big muscly Conan lads and ladies, if you paint those like individual display models with 40 different colors on each of them,
you're screwed.
You're screwed, right? But not only do you therefore going to have to paint every other part of that miniature to the same level, right? Or it's going to look wonky, but it will look messy, in my opinion. It will look too busy. It will be distracting almost to look at it. So I think there's still that. I think with army painting, you and me talk about army painting a lot. It's something we both enjoy doing and want to do more of and talk to people about, and all the rest of it. It's distilling it down, isn't it, to getting it as simple as you possibly can. And you almost do an awful lot of the work on making an army look good before you put any paint on it.
Yeah.
it's planning, it's picking the colors, it's that side of it, the application of what am I going to accentuate, what am I going to get away with doing, maybe 2 paints and done, kind of thing. I don't know.
I mean, one of the things I found is when I was painting an army and I wanted it to look really good, I would paint maybe more than I should have, and I'd be looking at it when it's here, and that model would look really good. I'd be really happy with it, and then I'd have one that maybe I wasn't particularly happy with. But if you're looking at them 2 feet away on a board, you are not going to be able to tell the difference. You will have to pick that model up to look at it to see if you've spent an extra 4 hours on that skill and put an extra 3 or 4 paints into it from 2 feet away, that you're not going to be able to tell if that's the case or not.
Yeah.
So I think it's just it's worth bearing in mind, I think.
That's nice, man. That's a good question, Matt. I like that. Thanks.
Yeah,
Chris,
really good.
Bringing that one. Excuse me. I think we'll do the final question to wrap this section up. This is from Michael. I bought Brest the Barbarian from Black Sun Miniatures a while ago, but except for a base coat and some initial airbrush work, it's just sat there as I haven't felt good enough to do it. To counter that, I've purchased a load more expensive busts, so he doesn't feel so special. Right, so it's interesting. He's my next mini, and I'm feeling good except for the NMM, which I screwed up last time. I say, don't worry, NMM, jump on the Patreon. We already are, so you'll be fine, Michael. So I guess just some thoughts on not trying things on major items and practicing versus just going for it. I'm a just go for it person, but it doesn't always work out well. Some thoughts and experiences of painting a bit more freely and loosely rather than planning every detail for ages before starting. So I wanted to leave this one last because I felt like it actually encompassed quite a lot of the other questions. And I've took some notes as you guys have answered the other ones as we've gone through it. And correct me if I'm wrong here or add in what you want. But I sort of feel like there's been 3/4 answers that have actually covered all the questions. And I think this will apply to what Michael's saying as well, is firstly is just start painting it. The longer you put it off, the more intimidating it's going to get. You're never going to be, you're not going to psych yourself up, are you? I doubt it anyway. Finish it. Like, finish is better than perfect. Like Andy and Matt was saying earlier, if you finish it, you can ask for feedback. You can improve. You can get better. Not that you always need to improve or get better when you're painting models. Sometimes it's just nice to paint them. Andy, you said a few times this idea about be realistic about what you can achieve.
Yeah, definitely.
Michael, will this be the best ever Brest the Barbarian that we'll ever see? Probably not. Does it matter? Definitely not. What maybe pick some things that you want to try and achieve on it. I'm not a fan. I don't adhere to the idea of the practice models. I don't like it. I think it's a waste of time. Just get on and do it. I think that's what works for me, I say. And then inevitably don't finish it. But, get on it and try it. And then, yes, this fear of failure, which I brought up earlier, which sort of goes back into the rest of them. So I think you can always talk yourself out of it, can't you? There'll always be a million reasons not to paint this, to doubt your ability. There will always be better painters than you. Doesn't matter, because there will always be people out there willing to help you improve if you want to reach out to them. But also, like, there's tons of stuff I see on YouTube or Instagram or whatever social media you like, that of models that are painted by people that I personally think I can probably paint better than. I look at it and I go, I could achieve that, or I could achieve better than that, or whatever. Yet they're still incredibly enjoyable to look at. They're still inspirational to see, because it's nice seeing painted miniatures, right? And I think that's what it comes down for me is if you just get on and paint it, if you just sit down and start, say, right, I'm going to paint 10 minutes this evening, and you start, you might only paint 10 minutes that evening, but you never know, you might end up painting for an hour. Right, you'll get some work done, right? And then all of a sudden, you almost trick yourself, right, into into getting going. And then before you know it, like one of you guys said earlier, I'll just get the base. We were talking about it with Sanguinius, and then I think Andy talked about it with the Skinnies. Just get the base coats down. Get that done. Then you're almost putting problems off until later. Worry about them later on. Worry about them when you get to them, because all of a sudden, by the time you get to them, you've done a load of work on the model. You might have a little bit of momentum going, but you'll also at least have something that you can ask for some advice on, rather than just someone showing you a bare resin miniature. What do I do with this? You sort of know where to go. So that was a large rambling answer to your question, Michael, but I think that is what I would say to do with it. He's not special. Just get some paint on him. And as Matt says, there's always buy a strip.
Yep. That is the sable. I think the problem that I think a lot of painters get into is, especially if they're coming into it from like a normal professional sort of like do painting for a living way, is they attach the monetary value of the miniature to the quality that they should be painting to, and that's not a good way to. It's not a good metric to go by. Yeah, shouldn't be doing that at all.
I'll tell you something that was staring me in the face throughout this. This week, I completely failed painting Tharian. So I have a second headless one here. But I painted him, and he was really important because he's my leader in my army, and it's a great model. And I absolutely ruined it. I did a really bad job. I basically painted it light, and then I added the dark colors in, and it just didn't work. And then I tried a few more bits, and I built a second one, and it took me half hour to build another one. And on the second attempt, I got everything right. But it wasn't a big deal to start again. Like, I had a second one, so I could start a second one, but I could have stripped the first one. But I tried, and it completely went wrong. And then on that other attempt, it went really right. And I learned a few things about how paint behaves and stuff like that. So, but if you don't crack on, you don't learn anything, do you? So
that's it. I feel like there's so many paint projects in my head that I have theoretically painted and failed, and I've never put paint on the model. And you never know what it might have ended up being like. But anyway, this main topic's gone on plenty long enough. I think we'll try and keep the show on track. As I said, I was fairly sure there'd be more than one show's worth of content in there, so it might be something we circle back round to a little bit later on in some future episodes. What I wanted to do for this final section of the show, guys, is look at what you guys have been up to. So, Matt, I think you're going to take us through this final bit here, and I'll keep an eye on the chat for you.
So everyone should be using the Paint Cultist hashtag, and we can find your stuff and pop it in episodes. And so I think on this one, we've got this one to begin with, which is Drax, I think it's called. I'm not really sure.
Was it Draxus? Yes, this is something we ran a paint along on the Patreon, the Cult of Draxus, I think you called it, Andy. And this was very much literally, we're going to paint this model start to finish. Was it about five episodes? Something like that. Episodes. And you can see in this slide here, John's literally sort of paint for paint copied what Andy was doing for the paint along. But there's a couple of slides later, there's another one, another Draxus model, isn't there? That gosh, I can't think of the name now. Sorry. That someone else has chosen. Thanks. That someone else has chosen to do in a completely different color scheme as well. You really enjoyed doing these, right? Like, it was a fun series to do on Patreon.
I think that it's a cool model just because you got so many basic elements you find in all models. So it was like shiny armor, tick, cloth, tick, skull, skin, non-metallic silver and non-metallic gold, purity seals. Like, they come up on everything. So so many key skills. Wasn't a marine, and it wasn't this isn't a chapter color really, is it? A jade. It's not one of the main chapters, so doing that was cool. And you got a baby dragon, so yeah, really fantastic model. Actually, I loved it when I first saw it, so it was cool to do it. And I think it was nice to cover those core skills, and quite a weird experience to see people like copy what you do, to be honest. I think it was like the first model where people copied something from a tutorial I did, so that was kind of weird in a good way.
No,
Really
it was nice,
positive.
man. It was some good interactions. A few of the guys in the chat just saying that they really enjoyed that series. It's something me and Andy were chatting about wanting to do again soon. So if any of you guys in the chat or in the Patreon have got some ideas, perhaps of what type of model or
kangaroo
color schemes or whatever that you might fancy doing for the next one, let us know, and I think we'll tee it up for a month or two's time for sure. What was the next slide, Matt?
Next slide was Scott's Primaris.
Next chapter.
Legion.
Space Vampires.
Yes.
Indeed.
I think this was based on another tutorial. Andy, you did the Blood Angel one a while back.
My last Space Marine, a long time ago now, 2019. Can you believe I've had this much time off Space Marines? I'll be back.
You'll be back.
I'll be back. I've got a Marine in mind, and it will be a tutorial, and I can't decide on the chapter, so maybe we'll do a vote on that. But yes, Scott's done loads of cool Blood Angels in the past, so it was an honour to see him have a go at my sort of current liking of style of Blood Angels. So yeah, that's really cool. Cool to see.
Great model.
The power sword's really good. The lightning, I think's the best bit on the mini, actually.
Nice. Is that the? It's quite a heavy conversion. This is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's bits of kit from everywhere.
Yeah.
Got a Death Watch cloak, right?
Yeah. The Ultramarine Sergeant that's walking forward.
Yeah. The one from that magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a core, great model. Really good finish on it as well. I really like the base too. Great work.
I believe he's working on a squad of them at some point.
Nice.
So yeah, I think it's try to replicate the 2017 bronze he got at GD, but with Primaris.
Oh, nice.
That's what I did.
Nice.
That's what I did.
Has he been up on the compendium yet, or not, Matt?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Nice. So go check that out. That's Golden Demon Compendium.
And yeah,
that's
really
awesome.
Cool. He just needs to get it done.
You're right. The base is wicked as well, isn't it? Actually, it's quite
lovely.
Yeah,
and that would be an interesting one to look at when you talk about types of contrast and how to tie it in.
Nice.
Dig that. I dig that. What's up next?
So the next is another Drax.
Here we go. Yes, this is the one that Craig was talking about. I loved that people chose to do different colours than what was on the tutorial. I think one thing we've always strived for when we've taught classes is we never wanted someone to go away from a class or a tutorial or whatever only knowing how to paint that one thing. You know, they come to class, they paint a red Space Marine. Now they can only ever paint a red Space Marine, and they go the next day. You get a call saying, "Oh, how do I paint a blue Space Marine?" You want to help people understand. You know, you don't just want them to parrot you. It's far too much of that, in my opinion, anyway, in the hobby. So you don't need to encourage any more of that. So yeah, it was nice, but also fair play to Rob and Craig for finishing them, which is what we've been talking about. I think in a lot of it, right?
That's the coolest thing, right?
Yeah. I reckon there was at least 10. I think I saw properly done.
That's crazy.
This one's even got a plinth on it. I mean, come on.
I like how the head swap as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to swap the head.
So it's the cool
thing is
cool
seeing it finish.
I really like the skull. Skull and the dragon, or whatever it is, parrot dragon.
It's like a familiar or something. I don't know. Weird.
It's pretty rad.
Baby dragon, come on.
Base dragon.
And I think the
That's right.
last one is
yes. Saw this earlier in the week. Love this. Speaking of
It's always
finished,
fills
I
me
think
with
she's
joy.
the most commonly finished one of our sci-fi models that I see.
Really?
Yeah, which is
What's-
awesome.
What's that?
Well, Seth, yeah, all right. So the actual 54mm models,
Figures,
like,
yeah.
you know, you can get Seth done in a session, right? There's a bit more you could if you could buy him, but he's sold out. But there's a bit more to these models, and I love her. I just, you know, we worked on these models a long time ago now, and it's still so cool to see them popping up. Like Ken's been working on one, hasn't he, for flipping ages?
Anna.
Be good to see, yeah, that Anna. Be good to see that done. And I also really like the slug in
Raoul.
Raoul, yeah. We still need to do a slug painting tutorial. I think that's on the line. I wanted to do a slug painting, speed painting competition at some show, so maybe we'll see what we can do with that.
I love how bright the slug is on the base as well.
Yeah,
it's really nice.
It's awesome seeing these finished. Like it's the best feeling, and you know, Guard went on for so long for us, and you know, obviously the campaign's finished, but we've still got to see other people paint them, and that's going to be mental. Like that's going to be really cool, and yeah, awesome job from Alex there.
Yeah, no, it's really, really nice. So this section, guys, is all about. We'd love it as the show grows and goes on. We'd love to be able to spend more and more time at the end of the show talking about what people have been doing in our particular sort of cultist community. The idea at the top of the show is to talk about what you've seen, but the idea at the end is very much we want to see what you've been up to. We want to see what's been getting you going with your painting. So if you want to use that hashtag paint cultist, we'll keep an eye on them over the 2 weeks between shows, and we'll endeavour to cover as many of them as we can at the end of the show, because it's very exciting for us, and it's nice to see so many of you guys in the chat as well, not just complimenting each other, but just form that community, which is what we've seen grow over the last 3 years through the classes and through the Patreon and YouTube. We want to keep growing that now with this, so make sure to use that hashtag, guys. But I think for the sake of keeping the show to 60 to 90 minutes each time, I think we're going to wrap up there, guys, if that's all right with you. So unless there's anything else you three wanted to say, thank you ever so much for answering those questions, chaps. It's very interesting to listen to. I rather selfishly just answered one at the end so I could sit and listen really to what you were to what you were saying on it. Yeah, basically, yeah. Just what you were saying was a good answer. Yeah. But it's something I think we've all struggled with, and I think probably still will struggle with, is that fear factor of starting the model. But there's definitely some nice ideas to at least give a go. I guess you can't mess it up till you start, right? That's what stops you. But yeah, thanks for joining us in the chat, those of you that have been watching this live. So guys, if you want to watch the show live and you want to interact with us, jump on the Patreon. We do the live stream to those guys before we put it out to the rest of the public on YouTube. So Rob, Kane, Craig, Gary's popped in there at the end, Michael, Dan, all you other guys, thanks ever so much for joining us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time, where we'll be talking about some topic we haven't decided yet. But it will be exactly the same format. So thanks a lot, Andy. Thanks a lot, Rich. Thanks a lot, Matt. And thanks to you guys in the chat. And we will see you next.
Ciao.
Matt.
See ya.